Thanks very much, Sav. So thank you. Real pleasure to be here today. So by way of introduction, if you don't know me, I'm Caleb Wright. I'm the Apprenticeship Scheme Manager at the University of Birmingham. Um, and I also am the Deputy Director for the National Technician Development Centre. Um, I have probably one of the best jobs at the university, and I get to work with apprentices day in, day out. Um, we have a fantastic group of apprentices. We have 75 new entrant apprentices across a whole range of areas, including over 30 now technical apprentices in different areas from lab technicians, engineering, right the way through to sort of IT and health and safety. So a huge variety. Um, really pleased to welcome you today, and I'll pass over for introduction to my colleague Karen.
Good morning, everybody. Yeah, it's lovely to see familiar names on the call. For those of you that don't know me, yeah, I'm Karen Bailey-Smith. My job title is ridiculously long, but I summarise my title usually just to say I'm the Technical Development Manager at Sheffield Hallam University, and also work with Caleb and the team at the NTDC on events such as this, anything to do with apprenticeships, and we're both continue to work on and support the level 3 higher education technician standard as well with the NTDC. Yeah, so I have 2 apprentices, nothing like the scale of Caleb's, but hopefully soon to be 6 by about September. Technical apprentices across different subjects. I've got a laboratory technician at the moment at level 3 and an engineering support technician also at level 3. I've got a couple of members of the team who are permanent members of staff and who have just taken on a degree apprenticeship in chartered management and leadership, and one that's doing a higher degree apprentice in food technology as well. So it's lovely to see everybody. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Karen. And I'll just try and share my slide. Oh, that's fine. Thanks, Sav. So just a bit of background on the National Technician Development Centre. I've had the pleasure of sort of supporting the NTDC probably since actually about 2017, and working on developing apprenticeship standards and support for universities across the country who are taking on apprentices or considering taking on apprentices. I know that our managers find that it is a hugely rewarding thing to do to take on an apprentice, and our apprentices, get a huge amount out of it and have progressed, and some of them have progressed to really great levels in our organisation. The NTDC was established in 2017. It is a self-funded and not-for-profit organisation. There are a number of partner affiliate universities, and I'm sure a lot of your universities on the call are partner affiliates. If they're not, do get in touch with us, and we can have that conversation. And what the NTDC does is it brings together expertise in a whole variety of different areas and services to support the technical workforce and assist to make sure that there's the resources and the support for institutions to deliver the high quality teaching, research, technical services that we all rely on. Technicians, as I'm sure you're aware, play an absolutely huge and sometimes underplayed role in universities. And without technicians, pretty much very little that universities do could happen. So they are absolutely vital. I will just mention there are lots of resources on the NTDC site, including case studies on apprenticeships, and thank you to those that have participated in that. So what we're going to do now, just before we start with a kind of more formal content, is a bit of a poll just to kind of see the audience. And I'm conscious that we still have people joining us. So Sav's going to kindly launch the poll now. There's just 4 questions, and we just want to kind of get a bit of a feel for who is in the audience, so we can make sure that everything is kind of tailored, and our speakers can tailor that for the audience. So I believe that is underway now. If you could answer that, we'll be really grateful. We should have the results shortly.
Yep, they're still coming in, Caleb, so give people a A little bit.
Get
No,
them
no
over
pressure,
soon.
anyone. Don't rush it. Okay, just sharing those results now.
So just looking at the audience, we have a real mixed audience. So sort of just over a quarter are current apprentices, which is great. We've got some former apprentices here, some apprentice managers here, some people considering undertaking an apprenticeship. So hopefully you'll find the Q&A really, really useful later on. And I'd encourage all of you, whatever kind of background you're coming into from to really, really come up with some questions for our panelists. Some people from other areas, and some considering employing an apprentice, and hopefully you'll kind of get the feel from today of how great it is to do that. And a real kind of mix of levels for those that are undertaking apprentices. So level 2s, level 3s, also got some higher levels and some degree apprentices, which is great. It's great to see we've got that big variety. And a lot of year 1 apprentices, some year 2s as well. And a mix of kind of areas. So lots, as you'd expect, lots of health and science, engineering and manufacturing, from universities, lots obviously that are in education as well, but also some digital, some creative, probably from the arts areas, and agricultural as well. So that is really interesting to see that we've got that breakdown. Hopefully we've got a bit of a variety of speakers today that will help kind of meet those different areas. Certainly when we come to the panel discussion, we hope that's really useful, because that will kind of give you the opportunity to have some questions to people that are doing apprenticeships right now, that have done an apprenticeship and that have progressed on to a high level apprenticeship, and even then managed an apprentice as well, which is really, really interesting. So I'm going to pass over to Karen now, who will introduce our first formal session.
Thank you, Caleb. So Tom and Rob from the Science Council are about to join us to talk about professional registration, which obviously, as lots of you know, links in with that recognition part of the technician commitment. And certainly I would say, both of you, there's been quite a lot of work over the last couple of years linking apprenticeships and standards to the categories and all of the work that you need to do to get your professional registration sorted. So it's really good, and I think it helps apprentices that might find a kind of professional recognition or registration process a little bit daunting. Hopefully this will take some of that fear away, and it's brilliant that apprentices now have got this opportunity to have this registration alongside their apprenticeship. So I will hand over to both of them. I understand you're both happy sharing your own screens. Is that correct, Tom?
Yes, Karen, that's fine. So I'll just share my slides and then I'll do a bit of a brief introduction, and we'll get into the content from there. But thanks ever so much for the introduction.
Thank you.
Okay, so just bear with me as I just bring my slides up. It's pretty slightly on a delay here, so if I can just get a thumbs up to make sure someone can see the screen, that'd be great. There should be a slide with a title. Cool, thank you so much. Okay, so yeah, thank you so much for welcoming us here today. My name's Tom Cheek. I'm the apprenticeship lead at the Science Council. I've been there for coming up to 3 years in June this year as part of a Gatsby funded project, and how we can better recognise technical education routes and support through kind of the membership and professional registration that can then be a natural progression and support as part of that. And I'm here today with Rob. Rob, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, so I'm Rob Butler. My background is I worked with the Science Council for 5 years promoting professional registration, and I sort of a bit of a disclosure. I also work for the Association of Science Education, who are not directly involved with apprentices, but I help run our registration board, and we are a professional body and a member of a Science Council as well. So I do this role because I'm an advocate. I'm professionally registered myself, and I'm a believer in the value of professional registration.
Lovely. Thanks, Rob. And you'll see on the title slides here at the bottom, there's the hashtag Igniting Careers. So as kind of Karen mentioned there, we've had a couple of years of work in this space now. So we're really trying to promote more apprentices to consider professional registration and the benefits and features of that. And we use this hashtag Igniting Careers. You may see that through some of the kind of social media posts that happened during this week, National Apprenticeship Week, and outside of this week as well. In terms of the plan for today's content, it was really useful to see the poll as well to kind of get a sense of the makeup of who's here today. Although this is obviously focused on the registers of the Science Council, when we talk about the features and the benefits of professional registration, that also applies to many other kind of professional registers. So I hope for those you can take some value from the content that we cover today. Rob will start off in a moment to give you an introduction about really is what's meant by professional registration. We'll give an introduction to our own registers of registered scientists and registered science technicians, and looking at some of the key features and the benefits and values of professional registration. I'm then going to expand on that a little bit more, but with a focus on apprenticeships and why apprentices are ideal applicants to become professionally registered. I'll also be able to kind of emphasise some of the different application routes that are now available. So as Karen mentioned there, we've been doing some mapping work that's meant there's some shortened application routes that are available. But we'll also talk about the full application routes that are available to apprentices, because that's equally valid and the registers are there for all. And then at the end, there'll be some time for any Q&A that comes out from this content. So that kind of gives you a summary of our plan today. Rob, I'll pass you over to yourself. I'll move on to the next slide. And if you'd like, just keep nudging me along when you want the next slide, and I'll move on from there.
Thank you. And we put this slide in just because a lot of people might not have heard of a Science Council, and that won't be unusual. You can't be an individual member of a Science Council, so don't go looking around thinking, how do I sign up? And in fact, we sit above a number of professional bodies who we'll mention later on. So I think it's always good to stress that, because we do sometimes see people on social media saying things, and you say, well, actually, you can't be a member of a Science Council. We are a registered charity, so that gives we have a duty, I suppose, of charitable aims, and they are enhancing professionalism, which is what we're here to talk about today. The Science Council also supports its member bodies in issues like policy. And I've worked with them through my professional body on EDI, so trying to improve our inclusivity. So they have a number of other roles as well, but they have 36 bodies. You'll find that as we go through this presentation, you'll recognise some of our professional bodies. Some of them are quite well known. But ultimately, the reason we're here today is to talk about professional registration, and that is we license our professional bodies to offer these different awards. Those are registered science technician, registered scientist, chartered scientist, and chartered science teacher. And the one I sort of fit in, chartered science teacher and chartered scientist, are sort of parallel to each other. And I'm a chartered science teacher because my background was teaching for 20 years. So moving on, if we think about the registers, it's worth saying as well that when you apply for the registers, you always apply for a specific register. So that's why we want to put a little overview in today, because it's not like when you did exams. I think about doing my degree or my A-levels, and when I went for assessment, there was a number of possible endpoints. Your assessment, which sort of sounds quite formal, doesn't it? The way we assess against the criteria is pass or fail. So you have to apply or pitch your application at the right register. No one's going to, and we'll talk about the application route for later on. But if you applied for the wrong register, or if you applied for a register and you submitted amazing, and I've seen the application, I've looked at one and thought that is well above the pitch of this register, you know, reapply with for a different register, no one's going to say, oh, that was amazing, you can go for the next one. However, there's no reason you have to stay on one register. They follow a hierarchy, so you can progress through them as your career develops. So the first one is a registered science technician, or RSci Tech. And there's a number of, when we talk about the competences, a number of sort of things that are common and in terms of the structure of the awards. So registered science technician with somebody who works with minimal supervision. They're able to interpret and evaluate data. They will recognize problems and apply scientific methods, and generally have sort of somebody who's been into the post for up to a year, or that can include you've sort of training and that sort of the route it took to get to a point you're at now. So we've got RSci Techs across the whole of the science economy. We've got my organisation has school science technicians. Yeah, we've got technicians in private labs, university labs, medical labs. It's open, you know, and they all have to meet the same criteria. That's the important thing about registration. It doesn't matter where you work, the standards for RSci Tech will be the same. So it's sort of a standard across the whole of the science economy. The next register sort of in sequence would be the registered scientist. So this is for somebody who maybe has a little more autonomy within their role. So they're sort of more of a team environment, I suppose. They'll design, develop and implement solutions, analyze, interpret and evaluate information. And they're often part of their role will be a responsibility for planning and developing courses of action. They would generally have 2 to 3 years of experience, and as I said before, you don't have to go in straight. If sometimes people say, oh, and we have this with my organisation, people think I'm somewhere between the two. There's no reason why you can't be an RSci Tech and then look at what skills, what experiences you're missing, and then work towards the next register. So that's registered scientist. For the final one, so I'm not going to talk about chartered science teacher because that's very niche, is chartered scientist. A chartered scientist is much more of a leader of scientists. So scoping, managing projects, multifaceted projects, so projects that have more of a sort of lots of people involved, or maybe different outcomes. You know, maybe sourcing new pieces of equipment and developing training plans, things to go with them. So there's more than one strand to it. They would have a very sort of detailed scientific understanding, or knowledge and understanding, and knowledge and understanding is key in all of the registers. It sort of underpins them. It's one of the strands that goes across all the different registers that we offer, and they have to have responsibility for not just their own work but leading other people as well. So it's sort of it's something that maybe you're moving towards further on down your career. That would be somebody who's got maybe 5 years experience, you know, because obviously you're not going to be a leader of teams straight out of the door as soon as you're qualified as well. So those are the 3 registers. They all have a very similar structure. They all follow the same sort of assessment procedures. The only difference between them is actually the wording of the criteria, because they're pitched at different sort of levels of the science economy. And it's worth saying, just reiterating, that if you apply for whichever register you apply for, the standards will be the same wherever you work. RSci Tech, whether you apply through a science council or direct with an organisation, whether you work in a university lab or a private lab, whether you're an apprentice starting your first role, or you've been working for sort of in a lab environment for 10-15 years, the standards will be exactly the same. And what professional registration is at its simplest is your name goes on a list, a register. It's peer assessed. which means it's assessed by other people who've been through the same process. So it's not like when you do your driving test and the people who assess your driving are experienced examiners who only do that role. The assessment is by your peers within the science sort of economy of science community, which I think it actually means that there's it's got a sort of a nice way for people to become involved as well once you've been registered. In fact, some of our registrants within my professional body sit on our registration board to support and advise other people applying further on. And you get letters as well. So the RSci Tech, RSci, CSci, CSci Teach, you get those post-nominal letters to go after your name, so you can be recognised. You're on email signatures. I'm not suggesting you have them on well, showing my age now, checkbooks, credit cards, those sorts of things. But I do my name badges for the organisation I work for as my CSci Teach at the end as well. It's a badge that I wear with pride. I believe it's important. My sort of personal story is I was sat in a school inspection because I was the acting head, and I sat with the lead inspector. He glanced over my shoulder and he saw my CSci Teach certificate, and he sort of made a throwaway comment, jokingly said, "Bit of a science geek, are we?" But he recognised that certificate, and straight away, without me having to say anything, it told him so much about me as a professional. And that's sort of really when the penny dropped for me on the benefits of professional registration. So in terms of recognition, and this is ultimately, I think, why we celebrate professional registration. It's about recognising you as a scientist. It's that knowledge, that experience that you bring with you. Everybody's got that science background at different levels, because the register pitched at different. There's a different sort of academic or qualification sort of requirement underpinning them, but it recognises your science knowledge. It recognises what you do on the job, so how you apply that science knowledge to your role, so how you bring that science that you know into your day-to-day sort of practice. And it also shows that because you've been through that process, and we keep mentioning things like ethics and integrity, but they're all part of the award as well. It's something that we find as well, that people are starting to look, not demand, but certainly it's advantageous in terms of when you're applying for jobs, for when people, because of what it says to you, to a potential employer. What can you do? It says on the slides. I don't want to read the slides, but one of the things that people say to me who've been through the process is what a confidence boost it gives them, because it's that recognition, that external validation that you are a good sort of competent scientist. You have to have a supporter, you have to have a certain skill set and knowledge base before you can apply. And we've worked hard as well to simplify that application process, so that people who are coming through sort of apprenticeships maybe have depending on the pathway you followed, can have a shorter route to be recognised, to be as you go through that journey to be professionally registered. So moving on to the next slide, I think this is the one, I suppose, but my personal sort of story sort of hinged around that demonstrating your credentials. Maybe the lead inspector, I said, looked at me, he would have known from that certificate that I'd had to that I'd got a sort of science knowledge base that I'd had to demonstrate how I applied that to my role as a science teacher. I wouldn't have to explain that to him. He recognises that. He'd know about the fact that although you have to follow a code of conduct if you work in a school anyway, but he'd know about that. He knows I keep my CPD up to date. All of that from just glancing at that certificate, all those letters after your name, it tells people that about you as a scientist, and that you keep your science sort of knowledge, your skills, your ability to do your job up to date. And I think that's really important. And it's not saying that you go on, you're following loads of distance learning courses. It's not sort of the demands aren't high, it's just an expectation that you keep your subject knowledge up to date. And the codes of conduct, our code of conduct is actually probably very similar to codes of conduct that you'll find in most workplaces as well. So, but it's again that commitment, that demonstration that you follow that. And ultimately, one of the things, I suppose, one of the reasons for applying is that ability to stand out and celebrate yourself as a scientist. We know that it can be a crowded market. I used to interview staff in my role as a leader. If you had two people who came for a job who were very similar, you're always looking for ways to differentiate them. How do you make a decision between these two candidates? I'm not saying that by being professional registered, you're going to run straight into those high pay instead of top jobs, but it does help you to stand out with people who are not professionally registered, because it's that sort of hallmark, isn't it? You've been externally judged to be to meet the standards, to be on the professional register. It tells that to potential employers. It tells that to people you deal with. If you've, like me, you update your email signature to show that you're professionally registered, then straight away somebody who glances at that will know. That also reflects well on the company who you work for, on your employer. So ultimately, that's why it's sought after, because it says something about the quality of their workforce, about employing scientists, and it's about what you bring to your competencies as a scientist, and not it goes across the whole of the science economy. So I've been professionally registered. I'm trying to work out now. I think we're coming up to 12-13 years now, and it's been so long that I've lost count of the years, but it's something that I certainly, as the more and more I've referred to it, the more I recognize that it's something to celebrate and share. But don't just take my word for it. I'll pause for 30 seconds or so to let you read these comments. These are, I will say, genuine comments. I mean, sometimes when you ask people for feedback, they can be a little bit sort of glowing, but these are genuine comments from people who've been through the process themselves, and I think they are reflective of why I value professional registration, and why I'd encourage you to certainly to investigate. It might not be for you, but at least you, if you investigate, the pathway, how you apply, and you can make that decision, an informed decision for yourself.
Okay, thank you, Rob. So Rob, that's been really helpful to kind of give us a bit of a grounding of what we mean by professional registration. For the next few slides and content, we're going to emphasize what this really means about apprentices, and why apprentices should consider it, and the routes that they can take to benefit from professional registration. So when we're talking about apprenticeship applications, Rob's given a full round of all the different kind of registers that are available, but I'm going to focus mainly on registered science technician and registered scientist today. And that's because predominantly in our work, we're finding that those apprenticeships that are level 3 and level 4 tend to link well to registered science technician, and level 5 and higher are linking into registered scientist. Now, for those registers, they all have a set number of professional competencies that have to be demonstrated, normally through a full application. And those competencies are spread across 5 kind of pillars that are showing on the screen here. Application of knowledge, personal responsibility, interpersonal skills, professional practice, and professionalism. And they're then further expanded to be have a full range of competencies that have to be covered. So, for example, for registered science technician, there are normally 14 competencies that have to be provided, and for RSci, 15. And when we can look at later on some of the streamlined routes, you'll see how we've been able to make the process of applying much more accessible by recognising which of these competencies have already been demonstrated by completing the apprenticeship, completing the endpoint assessment, and showing that you're fully occupationally competent. So using the apprenticeship for registration, apprentices are ideal for registration. On completion, you have gained extensive experience and you've shown that you are able to take theory and apply it into your work. You're able to contextualize it into working practice, whether it's principles, theories, methods, or techniques. You've done it in the real world and you've shown how it works, problem solving, and using different perspectives and different approaches. We also know that at the end of your apprenticeship that you've demonstrated full occupational competence and it's been independently assessed by an endpoint assessment organisation. All powerful things that allow the registers to take that and think, okay, well, how can we support the application? So applying for the registers, there's two routes I'm going to emphasise today. There's the shortened application route, which is really recognising those apprenticeships where the knowledge, skills and behaviours that are defined within your apprenticeship align really closely to those 14 or 15 competencies that cover those 5 areas that we talked about of the registers. Or there's the full application route where the knowledge, skills, behaviours may not explicitly show that there's a connection, but you still may be an ideal applicant. You might be in a role that fits in really well with the registers, and we would value and want to support you in applying through a full application route. So we'll be giving a bit of guidance on both of those today. But in terms of the shortened route, first of all, which apprenticeships are eligible? Now, these slides will be shared, I believe, outside of today's event. So I appreciate there's lots of information on here. So this is just a quick snapshot in terms of the presentation. But what's showing on the slides here are those level 3 and level 4 apprenticeships where the assessment work that's been undertaken at the Science Council has identified them as being aligned to some level to the registers, either fully aligned or majority aligned. Both outcomes result in the same thing in that you are then eligible to apply through a shortened route. And I'll be able to explain it in a little bit more detail what that looks like shortly. But that shows the kind of the range of the level 3 and level 4 apprenticeships that are eligible. And then I wanted to share with you an example of a case study of an applicant that's gone through that process. So Rodzers, he was a laboratory technician level 3. He applied for RSci Tech, and that was awarded through the Royal Society of Chemistry. And his key drivers to wanting to do it, he wanted to have that support for the future, having access to kind of wider learning, an opportunity to learn in that way and mentoring. And he also wanted that additional validation to show that he is continuing to grow in his career and giving him a platform and a foundation that allows for that continued growth. And then on this slide is showing those apprenticeships that are eligible for registered scientists. These are level 5 or higher apprenticeships. Again, some of them are majority aligned, some are fully aligned, but all are eligible to a type of shortened application. And again, you'll have more time to look at these slides to see if your apprenticeship is eligible outside of today's presentation. But again, I wanted to share an example of a case study of an individual that's gone through that process. So Sophie, she completed a laboratory scientist level 5 apprenticeship, which again is eligible for shortened route to RSci. And Sophie is now a member and was awarded through the Institute of Science and Technology. The drivers for Sophie, she felt that having that kind of award helps in terms of future careers, whether it be for annual reviews with her current employer or for future applications. And also it gave that access to, again, a wider network of learning, be it webinars or conferences, anything that kind of widens the perspective and broadens the knowledge. We do have an up-to-date list on our website. So the link on this slide here, you can go to this at any time and it will give you advice on those eligible apprenticeships. So if you are on an apprenticeship that's eligible, we have 12 of our licensed bodies that accept shortened application routes. And they're showing on the screen here. As Rob mentioned earlier in the presentation, the Science Council licensed the professional bodies to award these registers. So part of an application is selecting the professional body that resonates most with your needs and the community that you want to be part of and the information that you wish to seek and to be part of, to contribute and to share. But again, that gives you some guidance on the availability of that professional body selection. In terms of the shortened application route, if your apprenticeship is a fully aligned apprenticeship, that means basically through an assessment, we've identified that the knowledge, skills, behaviours are really stitched in well with the 14 or 15 competencies of RSci Tech and RSci. And if that's the case, there are 4 parts of an application. The main part is the apprenticeship certificate. That's the core of the application. There's also a requirement to, and I should just note with your certificate, it has to be within 2 years of receiving that certificate that you actually go through the shortened route. So that's the first requirement. Second part is with the reflective statement. We ask for a short reflective statement, which really gets you to consider how the apprenticeship's going to help the career moving forward. So looking at lifelong learning skills, looking at the kind of key theory and the practical experience that was gained, and the impact of those. In terms of competencies, so we talked about how there's normally 14 or 15 competencies. For a fully aligned, an applicant only has to complete 1, and that's for E2, which is a commitment to CPD. And then finally, you have an employer that's there to act as a supporting statement. So that's like a super streamlined application, taking those 14 or 15 competencies down to 1, short reflective statement, and the apprenticeship certificate. If it's a majority aligned apprenticeship, it's all of that above, plus a couple of additional things. There's 3 more competencies that have to be provided, which is focused around applying knowledge. So there'll be plenty of experience within your own apprenticeship that will allow you to reflect upon that. And there's also the requirement to provide either evidence of a qualification that's been completed, or you can use equivalence. So if you followed a really good learning plan as part of your apprenticeship that didn't have a mandated qualification, that could be a really good evidence of the equivalence that you've learned and how that's allowed you to take theory and apply it into your working practice. In terms of application support for the shortened route, I'm just going to pass you back to Rob just for the next couple of slides, and then we'll go on to a bit of information in terms of the support for full applications as well.
I think it's important to stress that when we're talking about application, that regardless of which route you're following, that you're never on your own. And I think we want to just to make it clear that we will be there is support available. So one of the we have sort of 2 different sort of sets of support, I suppose. We have a sort of set of webinars that are directed at people or pitched at people who are following a full application route. So that might be people who are following an apprenticeship where we haven't, where you're not aligned to the registration framework. It may also be somebody who completed their apprenticeship more than 2 years ago, because I said we accept a apprentice certificate that's up to 2 years old. So there's a set of workshops. We're also reaching out to apprenticeship providers with a set of live workshops as well, but they follow a different format because obviously it's a different pathway. But it's worth pointing out that the people who run or accompany whichever set of workshops you go to, there's one of us in from our I suppose our name, it hasn't changed over 5 years, but I suppose the nature of our role is application support mentor. There's always one of us there from a science council. We're all involved within different professional bodies with professional registration as well. So we have sort of experience of the different registers and helping people mentoring people to pass, and in terms of submitting their applications. The terminology calls them competency reports. Don't be put off by the terminology. That just means your application. If you see those, you think, oh my God, what does that mean? It just means that's your application. And we call the standards that you have to meet the competencies. So it sometimes sounds a little formal, but that's the way the Science Council describe their the standards that you have to meet. There's also a self-directors. We use Padlet, which is we've got a number of Padlets depending again on which workshops you attend, and if you want to follow through some that work alongside the webinars, or some that you can follow a pathway individually. They've got embedded videos, documents, exemplars, which I think a recent addition that people find really useful, because you can look at not just what we say, but what people have actually done. There's hints and tips there, and they are a really powerful resource, and people who reference them, who use them, it's very rare for them to come back and say, oh, I wasn't successful, what have I done wrong, because all the information they need is in there. So we can recommend those as well. You know, I say there is always someone from the Science Council to support and hold your hand, and also what we haven't mentioned in this slide is also the support. If you're already a member of a professional body, then they often have their own sort of line of support as well, people who you can talk to as well. So there's lots of help out there, and don't think that there's nobody you can't reach out to, because we're all willing to help and support you in terms of professional registration. It won't be that you need help meeting the standards, it might just be that you're not clear what goes in which box or what sort of things to include, and that's where the help comes in useful. Tom.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, so just to really emphasize from those last two slides, I suppose the support we can give, if you're an apprentice and you're on one of those eligible apprenticeships, go back to your training provider, ask them to get in contact with the Science Council. We'll arrange for free online workshops where we'll go in a bit more detail into that shortened application route and how we can best support with that. In terms of the self-directed guide, obviously Rob's given some information on that point. In terms of the 4 applications, Rob's just kind of given a couple of examples where if you're on an apprenticeship that's not eligible for a shortened route, or if your apprenticeship is more than 2 years old and you need to apply through the full route, there are these online workshops that are available, and the link on this slide will take you to the Science Council page that will guide you of all the dates that are available. They're free to attend. You may need a bit more guidance on which register is right for yourself as well for that. In terms of the shortened route, it's very prescriptive in which register it links to, but if it's not eligible, you may need some guidance on the register to select. I'm mindful we've only got a couple more minutes, so I'll just see what other content we've got available. We were going to give a little bit of information just about why, as an apprentice, you should also consider being a member of a professional body, whether it be student membership or affiliate membership, even before registration, because that has real value as well. So Rob, do you want to just cover this this next slide for that point?
It's the usual caveat that I'm working for a professional body, and the reason I work for a professional body is because I was involved with mine before I worked for them, for going back 15 years. In fact, I do remember meeting my professional body as a trainee. So yeah, I had a sort of maybe patchy relationship with them at the start. Then as a sole practitioner within, so I was the only sort of scientist within, because I worked in a small school. You may find yourself in a sort of parallel position, similar position, where you are the only apprentice or the only person who started recently. Then I think membership can be a really good way to reach out and meet other people, to network, to access sort of support. Support can come in lots of different forms, whether it's going to attending CPD, it can be social events. You know, sometimes it's just meeting someone who's got a friendly ear, who's understanding of a position you're in. But I think in terms of growing that network, and it's amazing. I was at our annual conference a couple of weeks ago, and I knew so many people there. And all of them just about I met through my professional body, and a lot of them I knew before I worked for them as well. So it's not just because I work for them, it's because it's a really sort of unique opportunity to meet people across similar roles, but maybe from different employers, good networking opportunity. And of course that changes maybe your perspective as well, because it broadens your horizons, you see what's out there, and you can become involved with them as much as you want. Certainly within my body, we're always looking for people to share. So we sort of published articles, but they're sort of really just sharing ideas in writing, and what have they found useful. I think I'm a strong advocate. From the universities, I've been talking to teaching trainees, because that's obviously who we focus on. Our sign-up rates are quite high because they value the opportunity to be involved, because they're at the starts of their careers. And I'd recommend becoming involved with professional bodies, because it does give you opportunities that might not otherwise be available. In terms of the number of professional bodies, there's one for everybody, I think, just about. it's very rare that we come across somebody, but the next slide has got an overview of all the different professional bodies that sit underneath the Science Council, and they are do have a look at their offers, do have a look at it's. I think as Tom said earlier on as well, it's an opportunity for you. You have to be you have to be a member of a professional body, because to be professionally registered, because from the moment of assessment onwards, it's your professional body that handle that registration and handle the renewal. So it's important. You can move between professional bodies as well. So if you join a professional body and you become professionally registered and you get a new job, or you think that another professional body would be a better match, then you can transfer your registration from one body to another. You don't have to be assessed, and you only have to be assessed once. So don't think, oh, I have to do it all again next year. You don't. Once you've been assessed, you've been assessed.
Thank you, Bob. And the final thing just to include there on that previous slide, there was also a point of that last kind of comment bubble. We're doing some research at the moment, trying to find out what are the wants and needs and the aspirations and challenges of apprentices, and how membership offer can best support that. So over the next kind of 4 to 8 weeks, there'll be an e-survey that's distributed out, and we'd like to get as much apprentice voice as we can, because that could have an impact on the membership offer, both for like now and for future apprentices. So that kind of really concludes the main part of our presentation. We're getting to the kind of question stage now, so I'll stop sharing the screen, and yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions that there may be. I did notice in the comment box there was a comment about a password needed for the Padlet. I'll check that in a few minutes when we finish presenting, and I'll add a little note back in the chat to make sure that's accessible.
Thank you, Rob and Tom, for really, really interesting talk on professional registration, and how apprentices and managers. It would be good to know how you kind of encouraging your apprentices around professional registration. Are there any questions from anyone for Rob or Tom? So just one thing I was kind of reflecting on is about the meeting people through professional registration. Some apprentices may be in teams where there's lots of other technicians, or they might be quite isolated. And so you find, I take it that professional registration is useful for people in perhaps smaller universities or smaller lab settings to kind of build on their networks.
Yeah, I think isolation is a really interesting word, isn't it? Especially with SMEs as well, where an apprentice might be the only apprentice on site, the only person who really understands that challenge of work, life and study balance, and how you get that to fit together. And having like an online community, or community where you can kind of share those experiences and share values and perspectives of things has real value, both in terms of registration. But I think especially again with membership, whilst you're an apprentice, you want to get the benefit of professional body membership, where you can widen your personal learning network and get access to maybe those who are experts in the field, or those who are very early in their careers. Is that kind of range and context of knowledge that can really help and support. But absolutely, and that really fits in well with that kind of research piece we're talking about. Some of our early indicators shows that kind of sometimes isolation is part of an apprentice's experience, and how professional bodies can potentially be part of that solution and kind of filling that void. We're also actually publishing like a blog and article today about how professional bodies can be part of the apprenticeship provision, and how it can enrich the learning experience, and how it can enhance and enable more positive destination on after the completion of the apprenticeship. So I'd probably encourage looking out for that. That'll be coming through on social media channels today, just to consider again how there's a wider kind of stakeholder group in apprenticeships. You've got the apprentice, you have the employer, you have the training providers, but then you have the professional bodies, and you have all these other bodies that are part of the same landscape, and how we can support each other in that way.
Thanks, Tom. And I suppose the portfolio, a lot of our apprentices have to do portfolios of evidence as they complete their apprenticeship. Do the Science Council find that working with apprentices to use those portfolios can be quite useful in terms of mapping the additional criteria that they might need to complete for professional registration?
Our experience so far from the applications we've received from apprentices is that they're brilliantly reflective, and they're actually able to, and the off-the-job learning log, and it might be a pain at the time doing the apprenticeship, but it's really developing good reflective skills. So when it comes to the application, our assessors have been consistently impressed with the content that they see within the applications. So whether that will be, again, going through a shortened route or through a full route, apprentices can really take those skills they've learned, their reflective practice skills, their independent learning skills, the digital learning skills to kind of navigate through the portal. These kind of things are great. They can also demonstrate that kind of resilience that they've built as an apprentice and the challenges they've had to face. It's really rewarding to see the apprentices showing how they've overcome those challenges and become a more confident and stronger learner. That's going to help them lifelong beyond the apprenticeship and the confines of the apprenticeship itself.
I just want to pick up from that. So Tracy in the chat has made a comment that professional registration can be difficult to promote amongst a workforce who have done their role for years. And I think, I don't know about you, Caleb, but the apprentices, as part of their apprenticeship, this whole reflective process, documenting everything that they do, us that are non-apprentice technicians and have done our roles for years, we never have to do that articulating on a daily basis of all our roles. And so it might be that if you have an apprentice in anybody's team that is going through the registration or is about to or has done it, somehow maybe think about using them to talk to other members of the team about how to do it. Because if the apprentice can do it, that might be one way of saying, well, hang on a minute, if the apprentice can do it, you guys can do it. I totally get it's a voluntary setup. Is this some of the issues, Tracy? I've just seen you've muted.
I have, yeah. I've been professionally registered forever and a day. I've been a chartered scientist for 20 years, and I'm really enthusiastic about it, and I'm really proud of the fact that I've earned that. So I really try hard to, to persuade my technical colleagues to, to come on board. It's not. In my university, you don't need to be professionally registered to do the role that we do. But in my previous role, it became sort of overnight, right? You've got to do professional registration and CPD. And it was like, whoa, what's happened? So I'm trying to get people on board now, and especially the younger members of the teams, because I think, in the future, it will become a prerequisite to do the role. And like was said earlier on, what sets you apart from somebody else? And this is what I keep trying to say, that, what was said earlier, that those letters speak volumes without you saying anything. And it's kind of frustrating, because if you've got a workforce that are not interested and you've got one new person who you're trying to encourage, they kind of get led by the colleagues, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. I think that, as Tom and Rob have both highlighted, there is so much support out there. So maybe sort of have a bit of a dig down as to the exact reasons why they don't want to be registered. A lot of it sometimes is the time it takes. You've got to spend time doing my work and reflecting and writing, but that can be broken down into chunks and things like that. So yeah, I think, as we all know, find your kind of flag bearer in your team and run with them.
I'm the flag bearer, but they keep beating me with it.
I think, and also that raises a really good point. I can see Mark's about a comment in the chat as well, in terms about this kind of we are doing quite a lot of work to try to think from an apprentice's perspective. This is almost like a natural progression path. It just happens naturally. They do the apprenticeship, they're part of a professional body as a member, maybe an apprentice membership, and that just naturally moves into professional registration. We want it to feel like it's this natural progression path. And then in terms of like the prerequisites and making it more kind of amplified within job descriptions as a requirement, these are kind of things that will help promote it further as we move forward. We know that, with IFATE and apprenticeships, the requirement of mandating certain things is becoming more challenging in the criteria, and they will use things like job descriptions that are out there to consider whether there's a demand for certain things as well within the industry. But we're doing a lot of work to try to make sure there's like momentum in progress, I suppose, and that registration is just seen as part of the natural career path of an apprentice.
And I think also just thinking about things for existing staff that perhaps have maybe not moved on a level, but are not necessarily interested in professional registration, if they are doing an apprenticeship as an existing member of staff, which they can of course do at a higher level, it might well encourage them to rethink about that as something that obviously will be valuable and aligned to the higher level apprenticeships and the degree and postgraduate apprenticeships. There's also, just for everyone, there's some really useful kind of links in the chat there that they've kindly put on, so do have a look at those. And clearly we could have probably a full day session on professional registration, also looking at obviously engineering and arts, which are, you know, just as important as well. So just want to close up with saying a big on this session with a huge thanks to Rob and Tom for coming along today. And I hope that you've all got different things out of that. And if you are an apprentice, obviously lots of links there. Speak to your manager, speak to your colleagues as well, because of it. Obviously, that's a great opportunity through your apprenticeship. And I know the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education, who develop the standards, are very keen that all standards, where possible, align to a professional body and professional recognition. So it's really important. So we'll now move on, and I'm really pleased to welcome two colleagues from the University of Birmingham today, Samantha Doby and Thomas Downs from BIFoR, and I won't steal their thunder in explaining what BIFoR is, but it's one of our most I mean, we have lots of interesting research projects, but it's, for me, I find it one of our most interesting ones, and we have one of our most fantastic apprentices out there as well, who's kindly joined us today as well. So I'll pass over to you, Samantha, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for inviting us to talk today. It's really great to be able to take part in Apprenticeships Week. So I'm just going to load up my presentation and then we'll get started. Bear with me 1 second. Can everyone see that one okay? Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, so my name is Sam. I'm the Learning and Engagement Lead at BIFoR. And I'm here talking with Tom Downs today, who is one of our engineering apprentices on site. And we're talking on behalf of the wider BIFoR team. So we're going to introduce you to some of the exciting research that's going on. And our focus is kind of what it's like working inside one of the largest climate change experiments, which of course is our BIFoR FACE facility. So just so that you're aware a bit about kind of what we're going to be talking about today, I'm going to set the scene, give you a bit of context behind the research that we're doing and kind of our main reasons behind it. I'm then going to introduce you to kind of the facility itself and how it works, before kind of focusing on some of the really exciting kind of research methods we're using at kind of exploring our forest lab. And then I'm going to give you a little bit of a flavour of some of those research outputs that are kind of already coming through, before passing on to Tom, and he's going to give a really nice kind of background into his kind of work at the facility and his career development so far. So after all of that, we'll be able to, of course, answer any questions, and do feel free to add them into the chat and things like that. If we can't get to them as we go along, I'm here as well afterwards, so we can answer them then too. Brilliant. So as everyone I'm sure is aware, our planet is warming up, although it's been a bit chilly today, particularly icy in Southampton, according to the chat feed. It is unfortunately warming, and this is because of our increase in carbon dioxide levels. So we're actually at a point where today our carbon dioxide levels are at the highest point than they have ever been, for the past 800,000 years. And because of that, we're having this kind of greenhouse effect, which is really significant. The interesting thing, though, is that between kind of 1 out of every 3 of those carbon dioxide molecules that we are kind of releasing into the atmosphere due to this burning of fossil fuels is actually taken out of the atmosphere by the land surface. And in particular, it's been taken out by our kind of trees and our forests. So because of that, there's obviously a really important role to be played by these trees and forests in actually helping mop up some of that excess carbon and regulating our carbon cycles. And as a result, having an impact in this kind of thermal balance as well. But do we know how much kind of forests are actually going to be able to deliver this service? to us, and to what extent are they going to be able to do that in the future? So there's lots of questions that this opens up. So things like, do the trees grow faster in response to this carbon, locking away more of it? Or will changes to the way that these carbon and water cycles operate actually create more problems for us? And added to that is kind of any changes in the way that the pests and diseases operating under this enhanced carbon dioxide going to create any further issues for us as well. We don't actually know the answers to those questions yet. Until now, we've not really been able to do kind of the large scale experiments we need to give us the definitive answers. Up until now, we do have kind of sophisticated climate models, so things like Earth system models, and they provide us with really, really nice kind of crystal balls that have allowed us to kind of make predictions about the future and look at kind of how carbon dioxide increases are going to affect the climate over the coming decades. And it's these timescales that are really, really important, because obviously it impacts on kind of our climate policies and whether we can reach things like the Paris Agreement. However, although we kind of understand the mechanisms and all the feedback loops and things like that, it's actually quite hard to quantify exactly kind of how those effects are going to happen. And that brings in lots of uncertainty. And when you're looking at these kind of complex social ecological systems at a global scale, you can understand the challenges that we have. And we need the data to kind of refine these models and better develop our kind of climate policies to help us mitigate all of the impacts that climate change is going to have. So that is where our BIFoR FACE facility fits in. So the Birmingham Institute for Forest Research hosts one of three air carbon enrichment sites, and that's known as BIFoR FACE. And I'm not sure if you've actually had the chance to go out and visit yet, but we have the facility that's just an hour away from our campus here at Birmingham University. It's in a lovely Staffordshire woodland just outside Norbury. And it links actually with two other sites that occur both in Australia, so Orkface, and then also one that's under construction in the Amazon rainforest in Brazil. So the really amazing thing here is that by working together, we can have these really good insights into temperate, subtropical, and actually tropical forests worldwide. Just a little note then before I go any further. So the Birmingham Institute of Forest Research is a huge interdisciplinary project that's occurring throughout Birmingham. So BIFoR FACE is just kind of one of our facilities that helps us investigate one of our kind of key challenges. And the overarching kind of aim of BIFoR is to provide this fundamental science, social science and cultural research. And we look at forested landscapes anywhere in the world. So it's not just limited to BIFoR FACE, but of course it's one of our important kind of facilities that we have. And just at the bottom of the slide there, you can see the kind of 4 key themes that we're tackling. So firstly, we have the impact of climate change on forests, and that's where our BIFoR FACE facility fits in. We're also looking at the resilience of trees to invasive pests and diseases. Alongside that, we're looking at the importance of forests to humans and also non-humans. And we're looking a little bit more at kind of forestry education for the creation of forest specialists, which is where it does also fit in a little bit more with today too. Obviously, there's lots of overlaps between these. It's just quite a simplified way of us splitting them apart. But the one that we're focusing on today is this impact of climate change on the forests, which we're exploring using our fantastic facility of BIFoR FACE. So just to introduce you a little bit more. Now, Tom, please do feel free to jump in because you have a lot more experience of actually being on the site on a daily basis. But I'm going to briefly overview the key bits that you need to know to understand how the experiment works. From my perspective, it's a fantastic site. It feels a little bit like you're in Jurassic Park when you visit. Obviously for plants, there's no dinosaurs, but it is a really fantastic place to go and visit too. We have 3 ambient face rings. So these rings, if you can see, are kind of where we've got these masts that are about 25 meters high. And they're in rings. You'll notice, if you're really, really keen at looking at the image, they're not in perfect circles. So we did try as much as we could to get lovely 30-meter circles. but we've worked as much as we can with the existing forests as well. So we didn't want to kind of cause any damage when we were actually engineering these masts. We wanted to make sure we were fitting in with the ecosystem itself. So there's free ambient air, and by that we mean that there's no kind of carbon dioxide added. And then there's free treatment rings. Now the treatment rings are where we're kind of pumping through this carbon dioxide, and we're actually raising the kind of concentrations that these trees are living amongst by 150 parts per million. And this is where we kind of are helping our trees to time travel. So the trees in these rings are actually subjected to these carbon dioxide concentrations that we'd expect by 2050. So we can see what impact this has as if they're living kind of in this 2050 world. So in 2016, we actually started collecting some baseline data, and it was in 2017, so just as you were launching, we were putting in our first treatment of carbon dioxide into our treatment arrays. And there's a huge collaborative kind of effort that goes behind this. So we've got more than 30 of the world's research institutions involved. And we've got, I think by this point, over 80 research projects as well that are occurring within this woodland. And the key thing to point out is actually that it is a whole ecosystem approach. So you might kind of take a tree out and look at specific pests and diseases in isolation in a lab. The really good thing that we can do with BIFoR FACE is actually look at the impact of this increase in carbon dioxide on the ecosystem as a whole. And I should point out that alongside the free treatment rings and the free ambient rings, we also have free kind of areas of the woodland as a bit of control that are called ghost arrays. And those are areas that are the same size, so about 30 meters in diameter, but they don't have any of the infrastructure. So this image here, please do not worry about kind of all the information on it. It's a bit blurry, but I don't need you to know kind of all of the key words on here. It's just to show the complexity of the ecosystem and the fact that by kind of having this site, scientists are able to study and understand all of these different mechanisms that are occurring in situ, rather than kind of taking it out and looking at it in a kind of lab setting. And it gives a really kind of rich picture of all of the research efforts that are ongoing to tackle little bits of this, and we can kind of have a really nice, clear overview of the impact of the increase in carbon dioxide by 2050. So some of the key research questions that we're hoping to ask using this setup, or answer even, are to do with what happens with that carbon dioxide. So as we increase the carbon dioxide levels, is it going to be taken up by the woodland? Or are we going to see kind of changes to the amount of micronutrients such as nitrogen and phosphorus that are going to limit that? Also, what kind of impact does this increase in carbon dioxide have on the biodiversity and also the structure and the function of the ecosystem? And then finally, a really nice thing we can kind of start to look at is working alongside the other FACE facilities. Can we extrapolate from here? Can we make any other kind of jumps to other woodlands and forests throughout the world and kind of look at the impact on carbon dioxide on those ecosystems? So now that I've given you kind of the context and a bit of the background as to the research questions we're hoping to look at as part of the project, I'm actually going to go into a little bit more detail about how the BIFoR FACE facility works. And again, Tom, if you've got anything you want to jump in at any point, please do. But basically, we have our carbon dioxide, and that actually comes as a waste product of the chemical industry, and they're making fertilizers. So we capture that carbon dioxide, and it's in its purest form, and it's transported to the site by tankers, which you can see here. And it goes from the tankers through a series of pipes into the woodlands towards these green control sheds. Now, these control sheds are quite little and small, but they're actually really, really important. And they're next to each of the arrays. So each of those rings has a control shed. And if you look really, really closely in this image here, next to each of the masts, which go all the way up 25 meters, we have these kind of black pipes, and that looks a little bit like guttering. So it has holes all the way through, and we release the carbon dioxide through those holes that exist at regular intervals all the way through. So we have carbon dioxide in the treatment rings that is dispersed throughout. And then again, these control rooms are really important because they monitor the levels of carbon dioxide. And a little bit like a thermostat for your house for heating, if we see any kind of increases or decreases above or below the 150 parts per million, it can amend it so that we have that kind of setup where we're constantly 150 parts per million above. So that's kind of how the facility works. That's how we get the carbon in and out into the woodland. I'm now going to look a little bit at how we actually track that carbon throughout our ecosystem. Now, the really interesting point here is that the fact that we're taking this carbon dioxide from burning of fossil fuels means that it actually looks very different to the carbon dioxide that's within the natural area. And it has a fingerprint that we can actually trace throughout the whole of the system. So it's actually called an isotopic signature, but I won't bore you with all of the intricacies of that, but it means that we can actually capture it and follow it all the way through. So we can follow it as it's released in the atmosphere, and then also as it becomes kind of fixed by photosynthesis into the leaves. And obviously, once that carbon dioxide is taken in by the plant, it can then be used for growth. So it can go into the trunk of the tree, it can go into the branches, it can go into the leaves, and those can fall as leaf litter. And these are all of the above ground vegetation processes that we can actually follow. But as I mentioned earlier, it's not just kind of the carbon we're interested in the whole ecosystem. So we also look at the plant health and the plant disease as well. And we can have a little look at the impact of the elevated carbon on animals, and in particular invertebrates. And then once our carbon has gone through the tree, it will end up in the roots. So we can explore kind of below ground processes as well. And as it gets processes that we can study, so we have a loss of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere through respiration too. Is my sound okay, by the way?
Yeah, it's starting to break up a little, but I think it's okay from my end. I don't know anyone else.
It was a little bit breaking
Okay,
up, but it sounds okay now.
It seems
Brilliant.
okay now.
Brilliant. Okay. Just let me know if it breaks up too much. I'll see if I can change any settings. Brill. Okay, so once we kind of have tracked our carbon then, so we're in the atmosphere, some of the experiments we can do, I'm just going to run through now before giving a flavour of the results and passing on to Tom. So we have a wide range of apparatus that we can use to track the exchange of water, energy and gases between the forest and the air. The image on the right-hand side, that's Anna. She's recently passed her PhD Viva, so we'll be looking at some of her results later on as well. And she's actually stood on top of the flux tower there, which is 40 metres high, and people do have to climb up that, which I'm sure Tom might be mentioning later too. And alongside the flux tower, we also have kind of these 4 MET masts, which can have lots more instruments that also allow us to collect data like wind speed and humidity and things like that. So a lot of instruments there to help us monitor how the atmosphere kind of is affected. As I mentioned earlier, we've got these 80 research projects, but we do have these core measurements that are taken by our dedicated sites team, of which Tom is one of them, to give us a really nice record of how this changes over the full 10 years. So once we've kind of tracked that carbon into the leaves, we can start looking at these above ground vegetation processes. So we have Anna again on the right hand side, but this time in the canopy looking at the leaves there and seeing how much of the carbon is actually allocated into the leaves. We also have kind of individual measurements we can take. So you can see Tom there Rob even, in the orange high vis, and he's taken some individual measurements with the leaves. And then there's some other equipment we can use. So the hemispherical lens photography, you can see an image kind of towards the center of the slide where we've got a researcher taking a photo, and that allows us to calculate kind of leaf plant area index and other productivity measures as well. So lots of different ways that we can capture where this carbon is going in the above vegetation processes. Other ones also include things that might be a little bit more invasive. So we can actually take tree cores. So a little bit like ice cores. Cores of trees give us a really good indicator of kind of the impact of the environmental changes over time. And they give us a good idea of the age. So interestingly, this is a mature oak forest mostly, and they've been there for around about 150 years. So our experiment is just monitoring 10 of those. And then we've also got kind of our leaf litter traps as well. So as I said, they capture the leaves and let us have a look at how the turnover is above ground. And then we do have things called dendrometers. So these are things that can be placed on the tree trunks, and they monitor the kind of tree growth over time. And we've got an image there of Laura, who's another PhD student at BIFoR. And at the top, we've got one of the kind of manual bands, which are just the silver ones. And then lower down, we've got an automated one. So they give us lots of measurements about kind of tree growth over time and how that carbon is affecting that process. And then in the middle there, we've got like an instrument that's called a sap flow meter. And that's just to point out that these are kind of ways that we can actually track the movement of water as well. So as the trees take up the carbon, they also release water through transpiration, and we can monitor the rates and how they change over time as well. So again, lots of other measurements that we can take of the forest. Other processes, we do look at things other than just the trees themselves. As I said, it's a whole ecosystem approach. So we have some lovely camera traps, and I particularly like watching the footage of our animals that we managed to capture in the woodlands. So we've got a badger there. I think there's owls and all sorts as well that have been caught. And then we do also have pitfall traps. They can be quite hard to spot, so that's why we've got the nice red label there. But it's to sample our ground foraging insects. So there's lots of research going on about those too. And then, so we've moved kind of from the air through the plants and into the ground now. And there's a lot of below ground processes we can look at. So alongside the tree cores, we also take soil cores. And we have things called root boxes too. So Michaela is the person in the image there who is just putting in one of these root boxes. And these are fantastic bits of kit that allow us to kind of track the root growth over time, and also look at kind of root exudates as well. So these are the things that the roots can kind of release into the woodland. And we do also, alongside our dedicated staff team, like Tom, we have some robots too to help us with our measurements. So at the bottom there, we've got robotic arms that place the cuvettes to measure the carbon dioxide. So as I said earlier, in addition to actually absorbing some of this carbon, the soil through its microorganisms is releasing some back through respiration as well. So I'm just going to play a little bit of a footage of that. You can see it in action. And it's a really useful tool for loading in cuvettes, which are these little kind of tiny, almost like test tubes that can collect the respiration gases that are released. And so we can monitor kind of how that differs between the elevated and the ambient rings as well. So I'm just going to give you a flavour of the results before passing on to Tom, who is very patiently waiting for me to stop talking. So what is a very key result then for BIFoR Face is whether it actually works or not. And we are pleased to say that it does. So if you look in the top right-hand corner, on that graph, we've got ambient CO2 in blue and the elevated CO2 in red. And you can see that we are consistently hitting that 150 parts per million increase. And we're reaching that 95% of the time, which is fantastic. You'll also notice that the contamination is actually very minimal. So the image on the bottom, the gold kind of halos are the treatment rings, whereas the ones that haven't got a halo are the ambient rings. And you'll see they're actually quite close together, really. But what we're able to detect is that there's not very much contamination of the CO2 in those ambient areas. So that's a really positive thing as well. One of the key bits of results that we've had is also that the residence time So the carbon dioxide that's released actually stays there for only about 3 minutes. So that gives you an indicator of how much carbon dioxide we actually need in order to maintain those levels throughout the day when those plants are photosynthesizing. And these results are from a paper that was published by Chris Hart, who is actually the manager of the BIFoR phase facility. So if you're interested, it'd be worth checking those out there. So back to Anna then. So these are some of the recent findings that we have about where that carbon is actually going. And what we have found is that increased light, so on days that are really nice and sunny, we are actually finding that the majority of that carbon is fixed into the forest, which is a really good sign. So about 33% of the carbon that's released is actually fit into kind of all taken up by those plants. Obviously, we're not going to get perfect sunny days all of the time in Staffordshire, but we find that overall, on average, we're getting an uptake of around about 23%, which is showing that that carbon is being fixed into the forest. And these results have been published, and they were some of our first ones from the base experiments come out by our Anna. Right, the next one is looking at where does that carbon go? So we know it's been fixed into the forest, but where is it actually going once it's been fixed through photosynthesis into the leaves? And we are finding that it is actually ending up in the trunks of the trees. So from this graph here, you can see in blue, we've got our ambient, and in a kind of goldy green colour, we've got the elevated. And on average, the trees are actually taking up that carbon and increasing their basal area by 28.5%. So a lot of that carbon is actually going into the tree trunks. A bit like if you were to consume a third extra calories, you might expect to have to loosen your belt. We're seeing the same thing happen for our trees. And as I said, we can look at above ground vegetation processes, but what about underground? So we found that there is actually a lot more happening underground as well. And we're finding that we're getting lots of enhanced root growth, particularly in the O horizon of the soil. So if you look at this kind of suite of graphs, it's the top one, and that we're seeing the kind of more interesting results there of elevated carbon showing increased root growth. And that combines with the fact that research that Michaela has been looking at in terms of exudates, so these kind of chemicals that are released by the roots, we're finding that 40% larger soluble carbon exudation is occurring by these oak roots under the elevated plots compared to the ambient ones. And there's some really nice, interesting thoughts behind this. So perhaps it's one of the tree strategies for actually feeding the soil microbes to secure nutrients. So as I mentioned earlier, it's not just the carbon, we need to be aware of the nitrogen, the phosphorus and the potassium too. And even though the plants are able to uptake some of this increased carbon, it is potentially going to be limited by other nutrients such as the nitrogen and the phosphorus. So it's really nice to see that the trees are responding to this by perhaps feeding the microbes with more of these exudates to try and get them to gather up more nitrogen for them. And as I mentioned earlier, so some of these other cycles of nutrients, so alongside the carbon cycle and the water cycle, perhaps we're looking at the nitrogen cycle too. And there is an overall kind of suggestion from work here done by Manon, who's another PhD student at BIFoR, that there are some shifting balances in the amounts of nitrogen that's cycled as well. So it's all starting to kind of come together and tally up to give us a really nice picture of what's happening. And just to summarise then, ultimately, we're hoping that some of these results will go into larger models, but this is a flavour of kind of what we've discovered so far in the experiment. So of that carbon dioxide that's going into the plant, 28% is ending up in increasing growth. Lots of it is going down into increasing the amount of roots as well, with a 40% increase in the root exudates and changes in the exudate chemistry. We're also seeing kind of soil nitrogen mineralization, which is increased too. In terms of water, we're starting to get some results as well as to how the water balances are being affected. And we're also kind of continuing to work on our leaf litter too. So we're hoping to get some results out there as well soon. But as I say, all of this is starting to kind of give us a clearer picture about the impact of the carbon dioxide to our woodlands, and also kind of how that's going to affect the carbon budgets. And hopefully we'll be able to use these within larger Earth systems models to give us some other exciting results as well. So that was very quick fire by me. Hopefully it's given you an idea of the kind of aims behind the research facility, some of the key questions we're kind of asking, and also some of the results that are coming out. I'm now going to pass over to Tom, and he's going to discuss his journey at BIFoR FACE so far as well.
Hello, can you hear me? Great. And do I have control over this PowerPoint? I don't believe it.
Do you want me to stop sharing so you can share, or would you?
No, it's okay. No, we'll carry on with this. Yeah, that's fine. Well, thank you very much for that. You definitely explained the majority of that better than I could. So, like, that was really good. So thanks for that. So yeah, I'm Tom Downs. I'm an apprentice engineering technician at BIFoR FACE. So my role here is to work underneath the head engineer, Nick Harper. He's actually on leave at the moment. But if I could just go to the next slide, please. Oh yeah, so that's a slide that's basically, yeah, that was to summarize everything that Sam's already talked through much better than I can. So yeah, BIFoR FACE is a facility to test the effects of raised CO2 levels on mature oak woodlands. So yeah, there are two others in the world. There's FACE on eucalyptus trees in Sydney, just outside Sydney in Australia. And there's another one which is just about to get started in the Amazon, and they're second generation FACE sites. So there are other FACE experiments, but they've all been done either in laboratories or on sort of man-made environments like planted forest plantations, essentially. So this is the only one in the Northern Hemisphere currently that is on a mature woodland. So it's seen as like a second generation experiment in a sense compared to the other ones. So just go to the next slide, please. Oh yeah, so you've already seen pictures like that, but as you can see, there's just these central, these circular towers making up the arrays. It's a really nice place to work, as you can see. This is a picture I took at the top of the Flux Tower in autumn 2020, I think. It was really cold, but it's a really amazing place to be able to do an apprenticeship. So I'm very lucky to be able to have this position. Thank you very much. Okay, yeah, so the main part of my role is, as an engineer, I'm not so much focused on the research side of things, although I do get involved with it. The main part of my role is to ensure that the CO2 levels are at the correct levels. So 150 parts above, 150 parts per million above the atmospheric level. So when we started the experiment in switch on, as Sam said, was in 2017, generally the atmospheric CO2 levels worldwide were about 408 parts per million, about 405 perhaps. And in the 6 years since we started the experiment, we're now looking at about 420 parts per million as the baseline. So in 6 years, that's a really noticeably large increase. So really, we're no longer hitting the atmospheric levels of about 2050 anymore. It's more looking about 6 years ahead of that. But so it's, yeah, 150 parts per million. And as you can see, my role is essentially I'm looking after all the instruments on site. So that's a combination of research instruments. So I'll be helping researchers, scientists with their equipment, the little robot arms. Essentially, their soil flux. I've lots of fun with those because they love to break down with all the bad weather and the rain, and they get wet inside. So lots of complicated things like that. They're really interesting. They essentially seal over a collar of the soil, and then, as Sam said, the CO2 that comes out of the soil is then measured through a gas analyzer. We have lots of instruments on our towers. I think we have 107 towers on site, as each array has 17, and then we have the masts on the Flux Tower as well. and a lot of those have got instruments on top that are measuring wind speed, wind direction, solar radiation, rainfall, and other things as well. So, and all of those are, well, some of those are feeding that information into an algorithm, which is then determining the control of the face software and the flow of the CO2 as well. So our system for operating the face, software, it's obviously a large pressure system for CO2. So a large part of my apprenticeship is, helping to operate this pressure system, which is initially in the tanks in the entrance to the building. The entrance to the site is filled with liquid CO2, which is stored at it's minus 22, 23 degrees liquid CO2 and stored at 20 bar. So it's high pressure liquid, and obviously if it's not looked after correctly and operated properly, it is dangerous. So I've had Nick, the engineer, teaching me over the last 2.5 years how to use this system. It's bespoke software, so it's been designed just for the face program here. So we have a really busy site every summer and through the winter as well. We have lots of different research and scientists, PhD students, doctors undertaking research as well on site, and there's a constant revolving door of people coming and doing their research, and after a year or two they'll have got the results and they'll go off to write their papers. So operating a site like that is obviously, there's a large health and safety factor to take in. So I'm performing inductions of people coming onto the site, making sure everything's safe. There are actually only 6 people who work on the site full time. There's myself, Nick the engineer, and Chris is the manager, and then we have sort of a facilities manager and then a couple of research technicians as well. So we all have different roles, and we basically, because there's only 6 of us on site, we cross over with each other's roles a lot, depending on the demand of what needs doing on a specific day. I might not just be focusing on the engineering side of things, and I might have to go and help out with some research. So, you have to be flexible working here. A large part of my role, as you can see in the picture just here, is that I get to work at height. So all of the towers on site need climbing every year. We're due to start our maintenance of the towers and the arrays this week, actually. So these black vent pipes that the CO2 is coming out of, all the holes that they have drilled in them to allow the CO2 to come out, they all need to be maintained because we have little plugs that get knocked out by wind and the trees every year. So we have to go up and rearrange the pattern on those essentially, as well as having general checks of the instruments and things. I'll be going up and cleaning all of the solar radiation sensors with a wet cloth, things like that need doing. So to do that, I have training, a yearly course I have to take for working at height, which is obviously a great opportunity to have a ticket to be able to do that, because then that, as an apprentice, I'm obviously looking to gain as much training as possible, do as many courses as possible. Another example of that is I've done my pressure system safety awareness course. Just a few weeks ago, I did a CCNSG course, which essentially is like a safety passport, which then allows you to work throughout the country in sort of large scale industrial, chemical, nuclear plants, things like that. Generally places where you aren't allowed to be on site for anything unless you have that safety passport. So things like that are really useful, as well as just general courses such as first aid, allowing me to, say I'm the only person on site and with some researchers, I need to be trusted and really responsible to be in charge of the site. So things like that are really important, and it's great for my apprenticeship to be able to get those experiences. Just go to the next slide, please. I just thought I'd quickly show you this. This is just a screen grab from the main CO2 system for the pressure system. This is the main sort of faceplate for the software. It's just to show you that obviously this looks quite complicated. I've spent another 2.5 years sort of getting to know this and learning it, and there are many other pages with much more functionality to them as well. So it's quite complicated to look at, but something like this is the kind of thing I'm having to learn to work with. So you can see in the center here, there's the 3 tanks. Yeah, this is the CO2 trend. So all 6 of the arrays that have the towers have this same setup, and it looks quite complicated at first. So essentially, this central line here is the wind speed, and the top here is CO2 levels. So we have a green trace, which you can see is quite erratic. That's a second by second CO2 trace. And then the pink or purple line is a 1 minute rolling average, and the white one is a 5 minute rolling average. So if you look at the left here, you can see these values. This blue line is actually the CO2 concentration in the ambient array that's paired with this array. So in the ambient array that has not got extra CO2 blowing into it, there is a steady trace of about, it's hard to tell exactly, but it's about 460 parts per million on this day. And the white trace, the 5 minute rolling average, which is the one we're most interested in, is following right in the center of these red lines, which is our target. So you can see that over the 5 minute rolling average, it is quite a stable trend, and it all relies on the wind speed and the wind direction. On really windy days, you'll find that the CO2 coming out of the towers, as soon as it's vented out of the pipes, it just gets blown away up into the sky. It goes straight away, and you have to continuously release more CO2 at a really high rate. And you can get through quite a lot of CO2 in just a day. You can get through multiple. Yeah, it's truckloads. It's really difficult to maintain it when it's like that. But on this example, the wind's quite low. We have a nice stable trend, and that's the ideal thing for us. Also, you can see. Sorry, yeah, thank you. Just this line at the bottom is the control valve response. So the red line is how much the program is asking for the control valve to be open, and then the yellow line is the response. So it's just an indicator. You can see the system's working as intended. A large part of my apprenticeship, is studying at college. It's something that everybody who's doing an apprenticeship will be familiar with. Everybody's system, their pathway works different. I've met people from the university who do 1 year of solid college, and then they might have a day release to go and work out on their job once a week. And then there are people who are like me, who work full-time throughout their entire apprenticeship, but during term time just have 1 day a week of college. So that's what I've been doing. I started in 2020. So I'm doing general engineering course. I did a year of level 2 practical work. So I was working on things like working on like machines, so working on lathes, milling machines, workbenches, things like that, which is more on the manufacturing side of things, as well as electrical work. And then this year I'm doing level 4 HNC, and I will be doing a second year of that soon. So a large part of that is maths. As an engineer, maths is one of the most important things, as well as science, mechanical principles, and computer aided design. So there's a lot of assignment work there, which is something I do have to do some work at home, but you have to try and fit it in with the work. So I've got a large amount of coursework to do, as well as my full-time job, as well. And then there's also other apprenticeship-based work they have to do to meet your pathway. But yeah, that's just another aspect of it. And then just a little bit to say after my apprenticeship. Hopefully, the plan for me is that I will be able to stay at BIFoR Face, see through to the end of the experiment, which is currently funded until 2027. With research, there is never concrete future until you actually have funding. So the program could be extended past that, or it might not be. It's hard to say. But even if I do get a role here, it's not going to be permanent, and it will be a fixed role, a fixed term role. So at some point I'll be leaving BIFoR, and I may well be able to stay at the university. There are plenty of other engineering pathways or similar roles in the research side of things that I might be able to look into. Or, you know, it's totally up to me with my training that I've received here. I might be able to go and look into other industries, work on plants, or I also have managed to pick up quite a lot of knowledge about general forest work. So there's lots of options available to me, which is one of the best things about doing an apprenticeship, is that really I've got lots of these skills that I've learned, but the avenues that have opened up to me are massive now. And I think, yeah, that's the end of my section. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom, and thanks, Sam. That's really, it's one of our most, I think, one of our most fascinating projects, and it's great now we're starting to get the results through from it as well. Tom, just a couple of questions from the chat. One I know the answer for, because it's were you brought in as a new apprentice to do, or an existing technician? And yeah, I know you were brought in as a new apprentice back at a very difficult time, because you started in March 2020. So you probably had one of the hardest possible apprenticeship journeys you can think of when you think of the type of role that you're doing. The other question is just any advice you have to other apprentices on managing your workload and training, and what you enjoy most about the role.
All right, so what would be your advice to other apprentices managing workload training? Well, the thing I enjoy most about the role, first of all, is obviously this is a very unique place that I work in, and I had no idea that I'd be able to get a job like this as an apprentice. So generally, when people think of apprenticeships, maybe people when they're in school think of apprenticeships, they think of maybe, you know, going and doing bricklaying, or certainly that's what people I and people around me thought of apprenticeships as, and you probably don't realize how varied they can be. So the job role that I've managed to get is obviously an amazing role to have, working in a really good team. My specific role here, I love being able to climb towers, meet lots of new people who, you know, so interesting. Some of the people I've worked with, who, you know, people who can name every insect you put in front of them, no matter how tiny it is, or people who just know so much about soil. It blows my mind sometimes. And when it comes to managing the workload, I think it really has helped me personally, especially recently, is to sit down, preferably with your assessor, as you should have an assessor as an apprentice, and sort of write down a list of all the things that you need to do, and get it all sort of ironed out in front of you. And then you can say, for example, I'm now working through sort of storyboards, which are like a job card. Essentially, you have to write a report on some work you've done, and I'm focusing on getting all of those done. And I know that after that, I've got 3 or 4 other massive projects, but if I can tick one off now, I can focus on the other ones afterwards. And I've got until June next year, which is when my apprenticeship finishes. And currently I'm on track to do that. One of the hardest things is probably the off-the-job training hours. So as part of your apprenticeship, you have to spend 20% of your time sort of not doing your job and learning how to do your job. It's a very hazy definition they give it, but they call it off-the-job training hours. Most of that is covered by your college work. So whenever you're at college, you're earning these hours. But obviously with weeks off, summer holidays, you don't reach 20% just by doing college. So you need to keep a log of everything you've done, basically. And you need to start that from the beginning if you can, because it's much easier to go back and look at what you've written instead of, you know, retrospectively and remembering what you did. It's quite difficult. So definitely, yeah, I would say that's quite important.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Samantha. That's been. I hope everyone's found that a really useful presentation. It's great, as I see, to see the research outputs at BIFoR, and as always, Tom, good to catch up on how your apprenticeship's going.
Thank you.
We're now going to move to. There is a question in the chat, so I will pass that on to you, Tom, and then we'll come back to Christine. But what I'm going to do now is just share my screen, and Karen and I will introduce the next section. Sav, would you be able to share the next slide? Because it's not loading on my screen for some reason.
Yep, no problem.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll get that up. Is that sharing for you?
Not, yeah, it's coming through now.
Perfect.
So we're really pleased to move on to the final part of today, which and it's great just hearing from Tom, but to hear from some other apprentices as well, and people that have done an apprenticeship, progressed on to apprenticeship. So I'm really pleased and thankful that we've got 4 really interesting guests. They're going to introduce themselves shortly, so we're hoping that everyone will come up with lots of questions for them, so we can get a bit of a discussion going. And either put those in the chat, or you can sort of raise your hand so we're aware of them. So Karen, do you want to introduce the first guests?
Sorry about that. I was thrown out and put back in again. The wonders of technology. So Oliver's just trying to join. He's got a couple of audio issues. So I'll just cover his slide on his behalf for the moment until he manages to actually join the meeting fully. So Oliver is a level 3 engineering apprentice, and he started at Hallam September 2021. We were looking originally in my team at starting our apprentices a similar time to Tom, actually, but because we weren't on site and practical facing, we decided to defer it a little bit, and I'm so glad that we did, because it's given them a much better experience. So he is supported by our engineering technicians across all different engineering subjects, and he has really come on in the last year, 18 months, not just technically, but also personally. He says here that he wasn't fully sure what he wanted to do. Did a level 2 engineering apprenticeship, and that was one of his best decisions, because it allowed him to develop his skills and behaviours, which then gave him that support and background to be able to study at college. He's doing the level 3, so that the BTEC is his mandatory qualification alongside his level 3 apprenticeship. So he goes to Sheffield College to do that studying, and over the past, I would say, 6 months or so, he's been moved into the electronics team and seems to have found that that is actually what he really, really enjoys. So while we have electronic engineering running at Hallam, he's also getting involved with some of the physics based work as well. And like Tom, it's opened up lots of different areas that he probably didn't know that much about beforehand, and has actually found that he is moving away from engineering, traditional engineering per se, and going on to electronics. And then you can see there at the bottom right, he was also very heavily involved in building our degree show exhibitions last year. So he's learning lots of construction skills and things like that as well. So I will hand back to Caleb to make other introductions, and I'll just check that Oliver is sorted with actually joining the call, if that's okay.
That's fine. Thanks, Karen. So next, I'm really, really pleased to introduce Abby Shipley. So if we could just move to Abby's slide, and I'll pass over to Abby to introduce herself.
Hiya, can anyone hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Brilliant. It's nice to have everyone here today. Been asked to talk a little bit about my apprenticeship experience and the routes that I've gone through to get where I am today. So this is a slide that I put together. So I enrolled in a level 3 apprenticeship scheme in 2019 as a lab technician in the Department of Chemistry. And after leaving school, it was a massive jump into industry, and it was a little daunting. With the support of my line manager and an internal assessor, I was able to complete my apprenticeship with flying colours. I found the work and study balance manageable, and during the times when it was getting on top of me, I had guidance from lots of different places, which was massively appreciated. The course at Sheffield College was occasionally unorganised, and COVID was an interruption in my studies, but overall I would definitely recommend the course to school leavers who are not fancying sixth form or college. My endpoint assessment was conducted after completing the MVQ and BTEC. Overall, I achieved a D-star grade in the BTEC, passed the NVQ and passed the EPA, which I'm very proud of. Since my level 3 apprenticeship in chemistry, I've moved departments and I've enrolled on a laboratory scientist level 6 apprenticeship or a degree apprenticeship at Manchester Metropolitan University, which has proven to be difficult at times, but this was to be expected. I'm excited to further my career and education through a path I'm already familiar with. The subjects that I study are useful at work because they are helping me have a better understanding of the chemistry that's going on behind the instruments that I'm using. And I believe that apprenticeship schemes are brilliant, and anyone who has the opportunity to be part of one should definitely go for it. Here are some images from my level 3 apprenticeship that I did back in 2019. So some the practicals that I did at college. There's me filling up an NMR magnet, doing some glass blowing. So all these sort of images were what I put together as part of my portfolio of evidence for my level 3 apprenticeship, along with many others and lots of descriptions about what I've been doing.
Thank you very much, Abby, and it's great to see a kind of progression after the apprenticeship, and hopefully that's something people have some questions on as we progress. So the next guest I'd like to introduce is Megan Hughes. So I'll pass over to you, Megan.
Hi, can you hear me all right?
Yep, perfect.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Megan. I'm currently working at Newcastle University. I've been quite fortunate in that this is my second apprenticeship. So I previously did an apprenticeship at Durham University. So that was doing my level 3 diploma in applied science. Unfortunately, there wasn't funding to keep us on, but I did eventually get a role at Newcastle. I'd been working there for about a year, and then I got offered to do a level 6 apprenticeship, which I'm now in my 5th and final year. I've really loved doing my apprenticeship. I think they're so brilliant. Like, I've learned so much. Like, I've come from Durham with experience. I've learned lots. So during my apprenticeship, it's allowed us to move roles. So I started in the School of Biomedical Science. So I was just supporting teaching there and just helping prep for all the practicals that we had. About 2 years later, I then moved to the School of Engineering in Environmental Engineering. So it was a bit of a change. So I went from being in a teaching environment to then a teaching and research. So I was able to help support the master's program and their students. And then I was also supporting them a lot of the PhDs and the academics in their research in the lab. So it was a lot of chemistry and biology. And then last year, I got a role in the School of Pharmacy, which is where I'm completing my last year. I'm doing my work-based project here as well. And I'm really looking forward to finishing, but I'm also like quite sad because it's been such a great thing to do. And that's about it, really.
Thanks very much, Megan. And yeah, another example, of how you can progress. So hopefully, again, some questions on that. And we're getting good geography coverage today as well across the country, which is fantastic. And so to our final panelist, which is Ryan Morrow. So I'll pass over to Ryan.
Yeah, hi. So I'm Ryan from the University of Kent, work in the Division of Computing, Engineering and Mathematical Sciences. So I guess I've had an interesting history with apprenticeships. I started an apprenticeship when I was 17, over 20 years ago now, in industry. I joined the university about 4 years ago, and I'm currently studying again as an apprentice. So I'm also doing a second apprenticeship, but I'm also a manager of about 3 to 4 apprentices now at the university across different levels and different skills. So we've got some IT technicians that are on apprenticeships and some mechanical engineering apprentices. So I mean, that's really me. I don't think I need to say too much more, and I guess we can just have some questions.
Thanks, Ryan.
No.
That's great.
Sorry, I'm just going to ask Oliver. He's managed to sort some audio stuff out.
Brilliant.
So Oliver, if you're able to unmute and turn your camera on and just say hello to everybody, that'd be lovely. Thank you.
Is it working?
Yeah, it's working.
Oh, hi there. My name's Ollie, or Oliver, whichever you would prefer to call me. So, as it stated in this slide, I did start off studying my level 2 within a factory, but then once I'd completed that, I looked to do level 3 at the university. And I think Karen covered most of the other stuff. A couple of other things that are involved in my role, I do a lot of support sessions within teaching as well. So not necessarily leading classes, but there to offer advice and guidance to low-level analog electronics and stuff. But it's really helped me progress within my own apprenticeship.
Thank you, Ollie.
Thank you.
That's great. And I think we've got like about 20 minutes or so for questions. So it'd be great if we could kind of get some questions in from the audience. If you're an apprentice out there, is there anything you've got, a huge range of examples there to ask? If you're a line manager, anything you want to ask the panel from their experience of their apprenticeships, or just any other questions really around the apprenticeships. And you can either put them in the chat, or if you want to just ask away, raise your hand and that's great. So we've got some questions that have come in prior to the event. So the first one is, can I study and work in the same place? Good question. So for example, could you study at the same university as you're working at? I also think it's a bit of a strange thing with the universities. I always find it difficult sometimes trying to recruit, getting people to realize that you can work at a university as a technician and as an apprentice. It's not necessarily have to go down the degree route, but really good question. So who would like to answer that first of all? I think we've got some good.
Yeah, I guess I can answer this one, Caleb. Yeah, so I study and work at the University of Kent. So as I said, I work for the Division of Computing Engineering and Mathematical Sciences, but I study my degree apprenticeship through Kent Business School, who are another school within the University of Kent. And actually having the two together is quite good. Our apprenticeship team at the University of Kent is great. There's lots of advice, lots of networking events, those kind of things. And yeah, so absolutely. I think, most universities are probably offering apprenticeship schemes nowadays. As I think Tom said earlier, people seem to think of it as this kind of bricklaying thing that you come straight out of school in, but it's at all levels now, across all kinds of trades and industries. And, you're never too young or too old to do so. So, yeah.
Thank you. And the next question is, do I need to study level 2, 3 or 4 apprenticeship to do a degree apprenticeship? So I don't know, Megan, if you want to perhaps come in on that one.
Yeah, I don't think you necessarily need to do a previous apprenticeship. So I think you can, if you have done, say for example, if you've done A levels and then you want to do your level 6, you can go on to an apprenticeship with your A levels. So yeah, no, I don't think it.
You're exactly right, Megan. Yeah, that's right. Every apprenticeship level has an entry level of criteria. So yes, at level 3 would be your GCSEs. You may not do a level 3 apprenticeship. You may do the traditional A levels. So your level 5, 6 would incorporate the A levels. Your level 4 is a bit of an overlap with it because it being an HND kind of level. So yes, you don't have to have done the previous levels of apprenticeship, and that applies right through to level 7, a master's as well. You will require to have a degree or the equivalent, but you may just do the master's as part of your own, say, staff development in your current role as well. So thank you for that.
The next question is kind of quite a straightforward one. It's around who pays the course fees. And so for degree apprenticeship, it should, if it's in England anyway, it'd be funded by the apprenticeship levy by your employer. So there shouldn't be any costs to the individual apprentice. the next question is, why did you, and I think this is one for everyone, why did you choose an apprenticeship over other options? And I'm also really keen to know how you kind of found out about your apprenticeship, being as perhaps a university isn't the first place you think of when you think, oh, I'm going to go and do an apprenticeship. So if we perhaps start with Ollie and then Abby, and then Megan and Ryan. So Ollie, why did you choose an apprenticeship?
I've been used to working ever since I left school, so it just made more sense. Plus, paycheck does help a lot.
Agreed.
Abby?
I think quite a lot of my friends at school were going to college and sixth form and whatever, and I just sort of was kind of done with school. Like, I was like, I don't really want to do this anymore, and just kind of wanted to progress. As Ollie said, getting a wage sounded really nice, and I was like, you know what, yeah, let's go for it. So I think I found it on the .gov website, or my mum found it on the .gov website and was like, oh, you should look at this. I was like, cheers, mum. So although you are still going to college or, you know, a place of study part-time during your apprenticeship, depending on what level you're doing, it's going to get you a lot more experience in terms of experiencing workplaces and experiencing having a job and having the responsibility of a job compared to going part-time would. I think also more so for the degree apprenticeship that I'm doing rather than the level 3, the idea of not having to pay student debts was nice. Yeah.
Thanks, Abby. And yeah, I think that's an important point with degree apprenticeships. It's a bit of a golden opportunity, actually, isn't it? Because you get the degree, the apprenticeship at the same time, and there's no student loan to cut that.
Yeah, definitely.
Megan?
Hi. So when I decided to do my level 3, I did actually do my A levels after college, and I found them quite difficult, and I didn't get the grades that I hoped for, so it was a bit disheartening. But then a family member was doing an engineering apprenticeship, and we kind of knew someone that was working for the training provider who said there was more like science stuff, because I'm really not in engineering. So I was quite fortunate enough to get it, and that's why I ended up doing that. And again, you get paid while you're doing your studying. And then for my level 6 that I'm doing now, I would encourage anyone who's interested in doing it, who's already like working for a company, if you have like yearly reviews or anything like that, just to like bring it up, because that's how it came about for me. I said I was interested in furthering my education. I would really like to get a degree, but I like earning money now. I don't want to leave to do it full time. So that's how it kind of came about for me.
Thanks, Megan. It's interesting to see the kind of similarities around why people were choosing one. And Ryan, from your perspective, particularly I'm interested in, as an existing staff member, why did you decide to go on and do another apprenticeship, a second apprenticeship?
Yeah, so I guess that's important context on why I'm an apprentice on a management apprenticeship, and a kind of I say a later stage in life, but I'm 38 now, so yeah, that's old for an apprentice, I guess. But there was a restructure at the University of Kent, and I applied for a role that one kind of grade above me at the time, which I didn't get, based on the fact that I didn't have the qualifications or necessary experience to do the role. And at that point, I kind of had found my ceiling within my current role. There wasn't much development opportunity for me in that role. And so if I wanted to do something else, how was I going to get those development opportunities, essentially? I knew that the university was the place I wanted to work. I really like the environment, and our campus is beautiful and all those kind of things. So the decision really was, I want to stay here, but I want to kind of do more with my career, and I want to go further. And how am I going to do that? and the apprenticeship was the kind of natural step for me. I guess for similar reasons to the other apprentices here, you know, having a wage is great, but for me it was about, I've got a family with 4 children and my fiance, and I've got a house to keep and a mortgage and all those kind of things. So yeah, giving up work to study and do something was not an option. And so this was the perfect way to get those development opportunities. And really good news is that I started that, and 6 months later I was actually promoted to the role that I was previously applying for. So you know, it paid for itself quite quickly. And I say paid in a figurative speech, because I'm not paying. You know, I again, mine's paid by the apprenticeship levy. So yeah, that's really why I decided to do it.
Thanks, Ryan. And a question probably for Abby and Megan. First of all, to Abby, why? I know we've already touched on the student loan reason, which is obviously a good advantage. But are there any other kind of advantages, do you think, from doing a degree apprenticeship over just doing a traditional degree?
So before I got this job, but where they offered for me to go ahead and do a degree apprenticeship, I was working in a different department of the University of Sheffield, and I actually applied full-time for a degree. So I got offered places at 3 different universities, and I was sort of a bit skeptical whether I'd fare well living away from home, because I've never lived away from home before, and I was a little bit worried about that and sort of just being more independent. So then I had the interview for the position that I'm in now, and during that interview they actually asked me if a degree apprenticeship was something that I'd want to consider, which I thought was amazing that they offered that me, or asked me about it during the actual interview, because I'd been asking my previous department about it quite a lot and they didn't really seem that interested in putting me through it. So to hear that from a different department whilst being in the interview was amazing. So I think I just had to think about it, and the job that I was wanting to go for, so the job that I'm in now, was one that I really couldn't miss out on an opportunity of, because you know, it was quite a bit higher than the grade that I was in previously, and they were offering me the position to do a degree apprenticeship. So I think in my eyes it was just a win-win. I didn't want to lose out on a wage, because I'd already obviously been on a wage for quite a long time, and I think the idea of being on student loans and things like that, I was like, I like to not be uncomfortable with the amount of money I've got. So yeah, I think if there's any downfalls in terms of doing the apprenticeship this way, the degree, sorry, this way, it's just that, as I said, the independence aspect of it, as I would have been moving out. So it would have been nice to sort of have that push to move out and have more independence, living by myself or living with flatmates or whatever. But at the same time, I don't think I was ready then. So because I've chosen this route, it's allowed me to sort of do it in my own time and be ready to move out when I choose to.
Thanks, Abby. And Megan, what is it similar for yourself, or are there other things that you kind of thought about when you went on to your degree apprenticeship?
So when it first came about, I did get the option just to do a degree by itself or do the apprenticeship. Part of that was because so I'm doing my apprenticeship with Teesside University, so I had to do a bit of negotiation on the fees. But in the end, I decided the apprenticeship was better, because in a similar way as when you do your professional registration, having that standard and passing it, it just shows that you're competent at what you do. And it's like a tick box straight away, like, because when you're applying for jobs, anyone can say anything, but you're putting on there to say, I've ticked all the boxes, I can actually do this, I've shown that I can. So for me, it was like better for my career.
Thanks, Megan. Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? Just thinking about how you do kind of make that transition from perhaps a completed new entrant apprentice, if you like, to an existing staff member doing an apprenticeship. Just looking in the chat, and a note comment from Peter that he's seen apprentices complete level 3 apprenticeship, they've moved on, and it fills with enormous pride. I know certainly, yeah, when I've worked with the apprentices I work on, I mean, fills me with pride seeing Tom today do the presentation. It's fantastic. We've now got apprentices a bit like Ryan who are managing other apprentices as well. So you know, it's great to kind of see that progress as apprenticeships get more and more used, which is great. I'd like to go to each panel member now just to see what you enjoy most or enjoyed most about your apprenticeship. So, Ollie, first of all, with you, what do you enjoy most about your apprenticeship?
It's hard to say, to be honest. There's quite a lot I enjoy about working just within the university because you get a lot of different experiences. Like was mentioned in my slide, I've managed to work on art exhibitions as well, just giving me a sort of a viewpoint that I wouldn't necessarily get, say, for instance, when I studied my level 2 working in a door factory.
Brilliant, thanks. Yeah, and obviously the practical side of it is something that you do get different to just doing a qualification at college or university. So definitely. Abby?
So I've really enjoyed like getting to know a massive range of different people. So the amount of networking and events and things like that I've done whilst working in this position has been amazing. Like I know people in all sorts of different fields and areas now. So it helps me a lot more in my work, because if there's something that I'm struggling with within my work, there isn't someone directly in work that is sort of specializes in it. Then I've got contacts of people that I can go to ask about those sorts of things. I think also networking is a really good thing for like if you're looking for a job in the future or you want to move away from your current role. Not saying that I do, but if I wanted to, there's people who I can go to get suggestions and things like that. As well, linking back to my degree apprenticeship, because I'm in the field of work where I'm in chemistry labs, I know a lot of people who know a lot about chemistry. I've got loads of people that I can ask about if I'm struggling with anything. My partner's actually got, he's a postdoc in chemistry, so I've got all the information that I need, so it's good.
I think that's a really good point, Abby. We're actually quite lucky at universities because of we obviously have all the academics as resources as well to kind of help our apprentices along the way. So definitely, certainly in those technical areas as well.
It helps as well when, sorry, it helps
go on.
When we're needing to do lab work and things like that with our degree apprenticeship. We don't always have to go into the university. So as I said earlier, my university is Manchester Metropolitan, but I work at the University of Sheffield. So when they're asking us to do lab work or work based along what we do in our jobs, it's really useful to actually have a lab here. So if there's an experiment that we need to do as part of some coursework, or you know, there's an experiment that's talked about in the coursework, we can physically do it in our own labs in our own time, and write up things about it like that. So yeah, it's good.
And yeah, I mean, and sometimes I think some of our apprentices say that the labs that we have, in particular they're doing their level 3, sometimes there's so much more there compared to actually what the college can provide, because of obviously what the nature of what we're doing. Megan, what do you most enjoy or most enjoyed?
I think I like the variety. So this is both kind of for my apprenticeship and working at a university. Like no day's the same. I've learned so many skills and so many different disciplines. Another benefit is if I need help, I've got so many resources and colleagues that I can ask. But at the same time, doing an apprenticeship, and especially the standard, you have to look at a lot at like what goes on in your organisation. So I can like bring things to my team as well if it's going to benefit it, as well from like the science side, from my degree as well.
Thanks, Megan. And Ryan, what do you most enjoy, and perhaps also what do you most enjoy about managing apprentices?
Managing apprentices, I think it was said in the chat, is really just seeing seeing them grow and develop. Especially the younger generation. The two apprentices I got are 19. So they seeing them develop and grow and apply the skills they're learning from college, in their day-to-day roles is just brilliant. Yeah, I guess that's the really good thing for me in that. Yeah.
Thank you, Ryan. And a question just come in for Ollie. You said in your intro, I hope to continue to study and work in the area. What do you think is next for you after you've completed your level 3 apprenticeship?
So we're actually looking into degree level apprenticeships within Sheffield Hallam itself. So I'll be looking into doing hopefully electrical and electronic engineering.
Brilliant. And maybe we're touching base with some of the apprentices today that have done that next step, because I think it's really good. I think the networking side of things is really important. Karen, was there anything you wanted to kind of?
Just to add to that, really, in that for me as an apprentice manager, I was very much focused on, I get my level 2 in, and I hadn't really thought about the future, but Oliver's really opened my eyes into them thinking about what they want to do next. And obviously we have the opportunity to draw down from the levy, and it helps me, give the opportunity to keep Oliver as well, but also progress him through further studying at the same time. So from a manager point of view, it's a benefit totally. So that's a really good option, and I think that sort of links in with, obviously, at Hallam we run a huge apprenticeship program. We are the education providers for something like 3,000 apprentices at Hallam, so why wouldn't we tap into that as a resource? So yeah, thank you, the panel. The comments have been really, really useful. I hope, certainly for me even, but I hope for everybody else as well so far. I think Ryan is doing a sterling job answering some of the questions in the chat. Thank you, Ryan.
I just wanted to bring that up, that Morgan had asked, if I'm working now and start an apprenticeship, would me having to go to college every week mean I get paid less? And I can see Abby and Ryan have both responded to that, so thank you for that. But I don't know if Karen or Caleb, you want to just touch on that as well.
Yeah, if you're an existing member of staff, a permanent member of staff, no, you certainly at Hallam, we wouldn't pay you any less. It's, we're getting that training. We've paid into the levy, admittedly, but all large organisations kind of do. So it's a benefit, and any organisation should really develop their staff and value their staff and give them those development opportunities. You want to add to it, Caleb?
No, I mean, absolutely, you're correct, and really that shouldn't be the case, because you're learning kind of a next level with the apprenticeship, so it's about moving to that next level, and we certainly don't pay ours less for doing it. Also, I know a question I often get asked is there a fee, that if say I left the university after doing my degree apprenticeship, would there be a charge for that? And there shouldn't be, because if it's funded through the apprenticeship levy, it's government funding. So therefore there shouldn't be any kind of fee for you, and apprentices shouldn't be paying anything towards their education, which is written into the kind of funding rules around that.
Caleb, can I just jump in there a second?
Yeah.
So when I began my level 3 apprenticeship, I didn't join as a university staff member. I joined straight into an apprenticeship scheme. So on that scheme, I was paid at an apprenticeship level, because I wasn't previously employed with the university. But then on this apprenticeship that I'm doing currently, I was previously employed with the university as a full-time staff member, so my wage has not decreased from becoming an apprentice. It's just remained the same. So if you join an apprenticeship or joining an employer straight off the bat into an apprenticeship, you may be paid less than the other staff members are at that place of work. But if you're already employed with them, your wage shouldn't go down. I was going to say something else, but I've forgotten now.
Yeah, I guess to expand on that, when I recruited as a manager to apprentices, they are paid in the apprenticeship pay scale. So they are paid less until they're 21, and then they have to be paid the cost of living rate anyway. But yeah.
I think different universities kind of pay different rates. depending on your kind of pay structure. So it's probably a question for your HR team in terms of how you do that locally. And just a comment that's come into the chat from Christine, saying it's been a privilege to manage and develop apprentices, and manager and assessor. So we see it from both sides. Definitely win-win. And I think actually, just on existing staff doing apprenticeships, what's great is you can actually use it as a retention tool. So you might think, oh, I'm losing for a portion of time while they're doing the course, but actually you're retaining them for 3-4 years if it's a degree apprenticeship. So it's actually a really good retention tool as well. So we're nearly out of time with the questions. Is there any final questions? If not, I do have one.
Sorry, Caleb. I raised my hand there, but then I kept lowering it. I kept putting it up and down and waving at you. Yeah, conscious of time, but just to ask, does anybody have any tips on if you were to is it the same as you?
That's my question. So yeah.
Oh, Caleb. Great minds. Yeah, do you have any tips that if you were to approach your current employer about potentially doing an apprenticeship scheme while retaining your current role? Any tips on how to do that if you've experienced it firsthand?
Yeah, I guess I can pick this one up from a managerial perspective. Really sell the benefits of what the apprenticeship provides you in your day-to-day job. How does it help develop you as a member of staff that brings some value to your company? I've had it the other way, where I've had staff kind of say, I want to do this apprenticeship, but really there's no business need for it. There wasn't a reason for them to do that I needed within my department. But then they've gone out on secondments and things like that to learn those skills somewhere else, because we want to retain them as a member of staff within the whole institution, but it wasn't necessarily aligned to the business needs of my division. So I think really just align it with where you want to be in the future in your own career, but also perhaps if you want to stay within that company or institute, the needs of the business, really.
Thank you, Ryan. Any other final points from our panelists that you'd like to get across about I suppose the benefits of doing your apprenticeship? I think we have covered quite a lot today. So, Karen, any final thoughts from you?
Just to add on, you were talking about retention and using apprenticeships to help retain. I've liaised with Caleb on this to get some ideas. We're thinking of doing it the other way as a kind of use for actual recruitment. We've been struggling to recruit to a couple of posts, and so now we're looking at either recruiting that post as a higher degree apprenticeship kind of post, or we'll hopefully go out to advert with the caveat that in the future there may be the option to do a degree apprenticeship as well in this area. So it does help for recruitment. Ryan, do you want to add into that?
Yeah, so that's exactly where my 3 apprentices came from within my team. We had some skills shortages in the area. We couldn't get mechanical engineers. So initially we had planned when we developed a new program at Kent to add a grade 6 technician, and we just couldn't find that. So I split that into 2 grade 3 technicians, and to really grow and nurture the skill that we needed. Yeah. And then exactly the same reason. So sold it as a recruitment opportunity. Yeah.
Lovely, thank you. Savannah.
Yeah, sorry, just a final question's just come directly to me that I think's really important to cover. So that's, please can you ask if there was anything they wish their level 3 manager was more aware of while they were completing the apprenticeship? So I don't know if anybody has anything in particular to add to that, but I do think if we use these last 2 minutes to cover that question, that'd be really valuable.
I wish my level 3 manager was more aware that they need to attend meetings and they need to put time in it as well. I think they sort of just thought that the college and everything was going to be covered by the people at the college, or the other people around me. I don't think he realized actually how much it's going to take from him. Obviously it's not a great deal, but he needs to attend certain things, and he was a bit reluctant to do that sometimes.
Thank you, Abby. Yeah. Megan, you know, were your manager at level 3?
So I was quite fortunate that when I did my level 3, 2 of my colleagues had previously done apprenticeships the same route. So my manager was quite good, very supportive. I think it depends on the individual and needs, because obviously that's changed a lot when I've done my level 6, and that my manager does attend, but because I've got experience in it, I kind of have that relationship of trust between us, and we can communicate with each other if they can't attend, if they're really busy.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Thanks, Megan. So I think we just want to say now, a huge thank you to all of our speakers today. So to Tom Cheek and Rob Butler from the Science Council. It was really interesting to get the understanding how you go about professional recognition and some real practical tips there for our apprentices. To my colleagues Samantha Dobie and Tom Downs, our fantastic apprentice at BIFoR, really interesting update on their research and the work on Tom's apprenticeship. And then to our panelists as well. So to Ollie, Abby, Megan and Ryan, thank you so much for sharing your experiences, because I think it is really helpful if you're for managers considering to take on apprenticeship, thinking should I or shouldn't I, to get the actual real experience is so vital. And also for other apprentices, so they know that they're perhaps not alone, that there are other people that have similar experiences as well. So Karen, do you have any final thoughts?
Agreed. Yep. And to our apprentices, I hope you all know this. You can register this as part of your off-the-job training.